Tonight, you're not in your own room. There's no soft hum of an air conditioner, no glow from your phone screen, and no familiar ceiling above you. Instead, the world feels older, stranger stone walls, breathing out cold, a candle flickering in the corner, and rafters creaking like they're alive. I'm Silas Whitmore, and I'll be your guide through this strange medieval night. Before we begin, make yourself comfortable. Turn the volume down low, pull the blanket up to your chin, and let yourself sink into your mattress, the one that thankfully doesn't smell like wet hay. And do me a favor, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from, what time it is, and if you're curled up alone or sharing the quiet with someone beside you. It's always comforting to know who's drifting off out there. Now we're stepping back centuries to a time when a good night's sleep was less of a promise and more of a challenge. In the Middle Ages, rest came in two parts: first sleep, a pause for prayer, tending fires, or checking on livestock, and then a second stretch until dawn. Beds weren't soft. They were sacks of hay, sometimes damp, often alive with things you didn't invite. Families and strangers huddled together for warmth. Monks rose at ungodly hours to chant in freezing chapels, and soldiers sometimes closed their eyes in armor, ready for alarms in the dark. So as you settle in, breathe deep and let the hum of the present fade away. Tonight, we'll wander through a single night as people did centuries ago, beneath creaking beams, beside restless animals, and under skies so dark they swallowed the stars. Imagine yourself there, lying in a drafty cottage or a crowded inn, feeling the first pull of sleep, at least until the bells, the bugs, or the whispers, human and otherwise, rouse you again. The first thing you notice as the last of the daylight slips away is how quickly the dark becomes absolute. There are no street lamps to soften the edges, no glowing windows across the way, just the faint orange of your own hearth and the dull glimmer of a crescent moon through a hole in the thatch. By the time the fire dies down, everyone in the cottage is already shuffling to their corners, and you follow, because in this world, nightfall doesn't just mark the end of the day. It starts the first shift of sleep. In the Middle Ages, rest comes in two halves, not one. 4 hours to begin with the first sleep, a deep, heavy plunge into unconsciousness that feels less like rest and more like escape. It's so common that people don't even give it a name. It's just the way nights work. When your eyes flutter open again, it isn't because something startled you. It's because your body is following the rhythm. It's always known, long before alarm clocks or coffee existed. For the next hour or two, you are expected to be awake, not restless, but deliberate, taking part in what everyone calls the watch. The cottage is still. There's only the sound of the wind sliding through the roof beams and the occasional shuffle from the family pig in the corner. Some people use this hour to pray whispering psalms to hedge against whatever might lurk beyond the rafters. Others stoke the hearth, coaxing a little more warmth from the dying embers before the frost sets in. If you're a farmer, you might pull on boots and step into the yard breath hanging white in the air to check the livestock. A goat gone missing in the night can cost more than a week's meals, and the wolves don't care how tired you are. For married couples, this watch period is considered the perfect time for closeness. Not romantic in the candlelit sense, but practical bodies, a little rested minds, quiet the world outside too dark to distract you. Medieval physicians even recommend it in their manuals, claiming the body is calm and temperate at this hour, which is a polite way of saying too groggy to argue. As you sit there wrapped in a wool cloak, listening to the small noises of the night, you realize this isn't insomnia. No one thinks of it that way. This hour is part of the rhythm, as natural as sunrise or supper. But when the watch ends and the embers fade to ash, it's time to return to your makeshift bed. The second sleep awaits a few more hours before the roosters start, before the frost creeps in, before another day begins. And yet, as you lie back down, you feel the rough crunch of straw beneath you, smell the faint sour dampness of the palate, and hear something tiny scuttle just beneath your shoulder. Second sleep might not come as easily as the first. The straw beneath you is not so much a mattress as it is a reminder that you are sleeping on something that once grew in a field and now exists only to prick your skin and creak under your weight. Medieval peasants call it a pallet, but that makes it sound kinder than it feels. The straw is packed into a rough sack if you're lucky. If not, it's simply scattered across the dirt floor, flattened only by use and the occasional passing chicken. It smells faintly of damp earth with a sharper, mustier edge that tells you the rain last week never quite left. And as you shift, you can hear and feel the tiny movements of whatever else now calls this bedding home. This is not a place for solitude. Entire families sleep here together, children wedged between parents, grandparents, pressed into corners, sometimes a cousin or two if they've come in from another village. Privacy is not a concern because warmth trumps everything. A single body can hold in heat. 5 can almost make the cold bearable. You learn quickly to turn a blind eye to elbows in your ribs and someone's breath on your neck because the alternative is freezing. There is little ceremony to bedtime. No one changes into pajamas. They don't exist here. Most people keep on the same clothes they wore all day, adding a cloak. If they have one, maybe pulling a cap down over their ears. Linens are rare, a luxury reserved for the wealthy or the lucky. The straw itself does the job of both mattress and blanket, trapping air just enough to dull the chill, though not the itching. You don't stretch out. You curl inward, tucking your limbs close to save every bit of warmth, listening to the sounds of breathing, snoring, and the occasional grunt from the pigs snuffling by the hearth. The nights aren't silent. The wind creeps in through the gaps in the thatch, moaning softly, and the roof beams pop and settle like tired bones. Somewhere in the dark, a field mouse scurries along the wall, its tiny feet pattering over wood and stone. The straw shifts again beneath you, and you decide not to think about whether it's a beetle, a flea, or something larger. Scratching will only make it worse, and besides waking the baby, will earn you the kind of glare only a grandmother can deliver. If you're one of the slightly more fortunate, the straw sits on a wooden frame, lifting you a few inches above the cold dirt and away from the most determined beetles. It doesn't change the smell or the sounds, but it does keep you from rolling into a puddle if the rain comes. For most, though, the floor is where the night is spent, the thin line between you and the frozen earth, softened by a blanket of whatever nature left behind. And if by some miracle you start to drift into real rest, it's rarely for long. A child might stir, a dog might bark, or a flea might find the one patch of skin you hadn't covered. Even in your exhaustion, you know this comfort isn't the goal here. Survival is. And if the scurrying and scratching prove too much, there's always another option, one that might be even less restful: the local inn. The inn, at least from the outside, looks like a reprieve. A sturdy timber frame, the faint glow of firelight leaking through shuttered windows, and the muffled sound of voices carry the promise of shelter, warmth. But once you step through the door, your hopes of quiet, solitary rest begin to dissolve. Inns in the Middle Ages aren't the cozy private retreats you might imagine. They're more like oversized communal beds with a roof, and your place in one depends on how quickly you can pay, negotiate, or simply squeeze in before the space fills. Inside, the air is thick smoke from the hearth mingles with the sour tang of ale sweat and wet wool. The common room is noisy, but not festive. Travelers slump over tables, some snoring already, others bargaining with the innkeeper for space upstairs. There is no promise of a room to yourself. Most inns don't have them unless you're wealthy enough to pay for the privilege. Even then, privacy is relative. Your private chamber may still come with cracks in the walls, and neighbors only a plank away. For the average traveler, sleep happens in a shared bed or on a bench near the fire, shoulder to shoulder, with strangers who may or may not smell like they've bathed this month. When you finally make it to the sleeping quarters, you see a row of long, sagging mattresses, each designed to hold 2, 3, sometimes even 4 people at once. The concept of personal space is a luxury no one here recognizes. You lie down, hoping to claim an edge, but your new bedfellows quickly settle in a merchant with a deep, rattling snore, a farmhand still damp from the rain, and a tinker whose belongings jingle faintly with every shift. Elbows find ribs, feet poke into backs, and someone's breath heavy with ale drifts across your cheek. It's not just the discomfort that keeps you awake, it's the risk. Theft is common in these crowded quarters, so you tie your purse string tight to your belt and tuck your pack under your head, using it as both pillow and alarm system. If someone moves it, you'll wake hopefully before you're any poorer. Sleep doesn't come easily when you're listening for soft footsteps or the creak of a door. Even the snores become a warning, a rhythm you track, because anything that breaks at a sudden silence or a sharp whisper might mean trouble. Still, it's better than the road. Outside, there are wolves, bandits, and the biting cold, all more dangerous than a stranger's elbow or a stolen coin. And as you finally drift into a shallow, uneasy doze, the last thing you hear is the chorus of snores, coughs, and the creak of the building settling for the night. At least until the first bell tolls, or someone's fitful dream jerks them awake, sending a ripple of movement down the row of bodies. Tonight rest is more of a compromise than a comfort. And when the restlessness finally drives you to whisper a prayer, you realize that here the night isn't for sleep alone, it's for survival. Long before anyone in this room drifts into real sleep, voices start to rise in the dark, not in song, but in murmured prayers. Here at the edge of another uneasy night, no one assumes they'll see morning. People whisper to saints, to angels, to a God who feels both close and distant, asking not for comfort, but for protection from the things that move unseen. In the Middle Ages, bedtime isn't about winding down with a warm drink or a soft tune. It's a final insurance policy, a plea spoken just in case your eyes close and never open again. One of the most common verses you hear softly repeated by parents to their children is familiar even now. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. It sounds gentle enough, almost like a lullaby, until you remember its meaning. Here, death in the night is not an abstraction. A single fever, a smoldering ember kicked loose from the hearth, a thief, or simply the weight of another year on an aging body, all can steal a breath in the hours between dusk and dawn. For the devout skipping prayers is as reckless as leaving the front door unlatched in wolf country. The prayers vary. A farmer might mutter the Pater Noster, tracing a cross in the air before curling into the straw. A mother may whisper to St. Apollonia to keep her children safe from the night air, believed to carry sickness. A monk already hours from his last meal might chant Compline, his voice slow and flat, echoing softly off stone walls as a ritual closing to his day. Some keep small charms by their beds, a wooden cross, a vial of holy water, or even a fragment of bone said to ward off spirits. These tokens are as common as blankets, serving as both comfort and warning. For children, the prayers are a way to hush their questions. Why does the wind sound like voices? Why did the dog leave its place by the fire? Parents remind them that angels watch, which sounds comforting until you realize it isn't an image of a soft-winged guardian, but of a celestial guard making sure no uninvited force slips into the house or into your dreams. As the last words fade, the room settles into a hushed stillness. The only sounds are the wind in the rafters and the slow, uneven breaths of those too tired to fear what lurks outside. You pull the scratchy cloak tighter, feeling the cold creep between the gaps in the thatch. And while your own lips might move in a whispered plea, you know the prayers aren't meant to make you feel better. They're meant to make sure that should the worst come, you're at least prepared to meet it. And even when your eyes finally close, peace doesn't always follow. The world of dreams is waiting, and here it's as likely to bring dread as comfort. Sleep finally comes, but it isn't the retreat you expect. In the medieval world, dreams are not harmless flickers of imagination or odd side effects of too much cheese. They are messages, tests, and sometimes traps. As your body sinks deeper into the straw and the last whispers of prayer fade, your mind drifts somewhere far more consequential than comfort would allow. Here, dreams are watched and weighed, and what you see can follow you into daylight. A dream of fire might mean your soul is in peril, a warning of hell itself. Water calm and still could signal purification or drowning. A faceless figure whispering in your ear might be a saint urging you to change your ways, or a demon trying to lure you into sin. Even something as absurd as seeing a goat with a man's voice could send you running to a priest, desperate to know if you're cursed or simply overtired. Theologians write entire manuals on this parsing, every symbol as though each one carries eternal weight. They remind you that the soul doesn't rest when the body does. It wanders vulnerable, and what it encounters could reveal hidden sins or attract dangerous attention. For common folk, a troubling dream often leads to action. A baker who dreams of his flour turning to ash might fast for a day, confess, or donate to the church, hoping to appease whatever force sent the vision. Parents listen closely when their children mutter about strange creatures or voices in their sleep, fearing it could mean a curse or a sign that evil lingers near the home. Monks, ever cautious, record their dreams in careful detail and report them to their superiors. A holy vision can elevate someone's status, but a dream of temptation could lead to punishment, even isolation, until they prove their soul is steady again. Not every dream is heavy, of course, but even the pleasant ones carry a shadow. A vision of a great feast might be seen as gluttony in disguise. A dream of finding coins could tempt accusations of greed. Few dare to laugh off their dreams. Too many believe the devil plants illusions to test the weak. For that reason, some people try to sleep sitting up, believing it will reduce the chance of vivid visions. Others burn herbs by the bed, hoping the smoke will ward off spirits, or at least cloud the memory of whatever the night might bring. When you wake heart-pounding from some half-remembered image, there's no shrugging it off as a quirk of sleep. Not here. You sit up the cold, biting at your skin, and wonder if you need to speak to the priest before nightfall. And as you try to settle again, still rattled, a new sound begins to creep into the room, one that tells you sleep isn't the only thing about to be interrupted. Somewhere outside, a bell begins to toll. The bell doesn't just toll once. It keeps ringing steady and deliberate, as if the cold air itself needs to be shaken awake. It's not calling for help or warning of raiders. It's summoning every soul in the monastery to rise for matins, the first service of the day, though here day means the blackest stretch of night. Even if you're only visiting, the rhythm doesn't spare you. The moment the bell sounds, the dormitory stirs like a field of uneasy birds. The room is frigid, the kind of cold that creeps into your lungs and lingers in your teeth. The only light comes from a single taper flickering by the door. Dozens of monks, their robes stiff from last night's frost, pull themselves from wooden planks or straw pallets. There are no soft beds here, no down-filled quilts, just bare essentials and the discipline to use them. No one speaks. Silence is expected, a continuation of the vow taken after Compline. The only sounds are the shuffle of sandals and the occasional crack of a joint stiff from the cold. You wrap your own cloak tighter and follow as the line forms every figure, a shadow drifting down the stone corridor. The air smells faintly of tallow and damp stone, and the chill seems to deepen with each step toward the chapel. Inside, the space is cavernous, lit only by candles whose flames tremble as the draft snakes through the arches. Stone absorbs sound, so every cough, every scrape of sandal echoes until it feels like the building itself is murmuring. The service begins not with a speech, but with chanting, low rhythmic and unhurried. Psalms are recited scriptures, read aloud all in Latin words. You only half recognize if you're not accustomed to the cadence. The sound is steady, almost hypnotic, but your body protests. Your stomach reminds you that dinner was hours ago and consisted of lentils and bread, barely hard enough to chew. Your eyelids feel heavy, threatening to close, even as the chant rises and falls like a tide. For the monks, this is the point. The discomfort is deliberate. To wake in the coldest, darkest hour, to give this time to God before warmth, food, or more sleep is a sign of devotion. And yet, even among the devout, fatigue wins. There are records of monks nodding off mid-prayer, punished with extra chores, or ironically, more prayers at the next service. If you're unlucky, the prior might catch you swaying on your feet, and you'll find yourself scrubbing flagstones instead of resting tomorrow. When the last candle is snuffed and the voices fall silent, the monks file back toward their dormitory. Some will manage a second stretch of sleep before dawn. Others, bound by stricter orders, will head to the cloister to study or to the fields to labor their bodies running on the meager fuel of discipline alone. And as you shuffle back toward your plank and scratchy blanket, the quiet settles in again, save for the faint whistle of wind through the cracks. If sleep comes, it will not linger. There are still hours to go before the sun, and plenty left in the night to test your patience. When you finally return to your place on the plank, it isn't the cold or the creaking that keeps you awake. It's the posture. Around you, several monks don't even bother to lie flat. Instead, they prop themselves up against the walls or rest in a half-seated position, backs braced by bolsters, knees drawn slightly up as though they're preparing to rise at a moment's notice. It looks uncomfortable because it is, but here, discomfort isn't a flaw. It's a feature. The reasoning, if you ask them, sounds half practical and half superstitious. Physicians of the time argue that lying flat can congest the brain and suffocate the lungs, throwing the body's humors out of balance. Upright sleep, they insist, helps digestion, prevents nightmares, and keeps your humors properly aligned. Whether or not any of that holds truth, it gives the practice a sheen of medical authority. But beneath the surface, there's a deeper, older fear. Lying flat too closely resembles death. The stillness, the posture, the way the body mirrors the dead at their funerals, it's said to invite the wrong sort of attention, whether from wandering spirits, the angel of death, or even God himself, who might mistake your rest for readiness. For the wealthy, this posture is often softened with angled bed frames, stacks of cushions, and heavy drapes to block the draft. Nobles recline like dignified invalids, convinced it keeps them alive and elegant. In monasteries, though, the austerity is harsher. Some orders forbid pillows entirely, so monks sleep seated on wooden benches, or against cold walls, cloaks wrapped tightly, heads bowed, as though in perpetual prayer. Sleep becomes less about restoration and more about vigilance, a rehearsal for the discipline they believe the soul must one day show. As you shift on your own rough bedding, trying to find a position that doesn't numb your legs or wrench your neck, the reasoning begins to creep in. The draft is sharp, the shadows long, and every sound, the faint whistle of wind, the soft scratch of a mouse in the rafters, feels like a reminder that the world doesn't rest just because you want to. Maybe sitting up ready isn't such a bad idea after all. You pull your cloak tighter and lean into the wall, telling yourself it's just to stay warm, but deep down, you can't shake the thought that lying flat feels like tempting fate. And just when you start to drift in this awkward position, half dreaming, half aware, something else reminds you why sleep here never comes easy. A faint rustle moves through the straw at your feet, not a mouse this time, but something smaller and far more numerous. The night, it seems, has more companions to offer. The rustling turns into a persistent tickle on your ankle first, then your wrist, and finally along the line of your neck. It isn't your imagination. Medieval sleep comes with uninvited companions, and none of them care how tired you are. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs are the true lords of the night, thriving in the straw, the seams of wooden frames, even the cracks between the stones. They don't discriminate between peasant and noble, monk or merchant. If you're warm and breathing, you're a feast. You understand now why so many people sleep fully dressed, even beneath layers of rough wool. It isn't just to keep warm. It's armor against the cold, yes, but also against the crawl of tiny legs searching for a patch of exposed skin. Nightcaps, long and ridiculous looking, serve the same purpose, covering the scalp where lice most like to hide. Even in noble houses with feather mattresses and embroidered linens, the scratching and twitching is universal. Servants are sometimes tasked with nitpicking, literally plucking lice from their master's hair by firelight, a grim reminder that satin sheets don't stop the infestation. The remedies range from mildly useful to outright bizarre. Some households burn pungent herbs like wormwood or tansy near the bed, hoping the bitter smoke will drive the pests away. Others sprinkle ashes in their bedding, the powder settling in every crease, until the bed feels more like a grave than a place to rest. A few desperate souls even sleep with garlic or onions tucked beside them, certain that the smell will deter both insects and evil spirits, though it does nothing for romance. None of it truly works. By morning, the bites are there, red, itchy, and clustered like a map of the night's quiet battles. For monks and peasants alike, the pests take on a moral weight. Fleas and lice are preached about as symbols of sin, reminders of humanity's fallen state, and the bodily punishment that comes from neglect or vanity. Bedbugs, silent and patient, are harder to moralize, but their persistence becomes a metaphor in sermons. As the bedbug feeds in darkness, so too does the devil thrive when the soul is idle. It's a bleak kind of comfort, turning discomfort into a lesson, but it doesn't stop the scratching. As you curl tighter, cloak drawn close, and head buried in your sleeve, you start to feel every brush of air as another set of tiny feet. The itch never fully fades. It just becomes part of the night's rhythm, something to endure until dawn. And if you want true warmth, the kind that distracts from the crawling, you'll have to share your space with creatures far larger and only slightly less troublesome than the ones in the straw. The scratching fades only when a new kind of warmth fills the room, a heavy living heat that comes not from blankets or fires, but from the creatures sharing your space. In a medieval cottage, animals are more than companions. They're insulation. Pigs, dogs, even the occasional chicken nestle close at night, not because anyone is sentimental, but because body heat is the cheapest and most reliable defense against the cold. The pig by the hearth is the most valuable bedfellow. Its broad, warm body radiates heat into the air, enough to make the bitter chill less sharp. Dogs curl at your feet, their breathing steady, their fur a buffer between your toes, and the freezing drafts that creep along the floorboards. Chickens roost on beams, or if the night is particularly brutal, settle into the straw near the family feathers, rustling softly with every shift. No one complains, at least not much. These animals mean the difference between shivering through the night and finding a pocket of comfort in a world that offers little of it. But comfort has its price. The sounds are constant, the pig's snorts and occasional squeals, the dog's paws twitching in sleep, the sudden flurry of feathers when a chicken startles awake. The smells, too, are impossible to ignore, a musky mix of fur hay and the lingering scent of whatever the pig last rooted through outside. Even the warmth itself can become overwhelming, a damp heat that makes the scratch of your wool cloak and the itch of flea bites all the more unbearable. And if one of the animals decides to wander, you might wake with a hoof on your leg or a cold nose pressed against your cheek. For poorer families, this nightly menagerie is a matter of survival. The single-room home serves as kitchen, stable, and bedroom all at once, so everyone, human and animal alike, shares the same space. It keeps the living alive, but it also blurs the lines between comfort and chaos. The constant closeness frays nerves, tests patience, and turns sleep into something less like rest and more like negotiation with every snort rustle and shift in the dark. Still, compared to the alternatives, nights without fire, where the frost creeps so deep that breath freezes on the inside of the walls, this animal warmth feels almost like a luxury. You pull your cloak tighter, adjust to the rhythm of the snuffling and the occasional feathered peck at your sleeve, and try to surrender to the heat, the noise, and the smell. But if you were hoping for peace, the night isn't done with you yet. Not everyone gets to fall asleep surrounded by warmth. Some must rest with something far colder and far less forgiving pressed against their ribs steel. For soldiers, there is no warmth from pigs or dogs, no soft nest of straw shared with family. The night brings only stone steel and the knowledge that danger doesn't wait for daylight. On campaign, in a besieged castle, or along a hostile borderman at arms, learn quickly that sleep is a luxury and one that might get them killed if they're not ready when the alarm sounds. Most don't wear their full armor to bed. Even the most seasoned knight isn't eager to lie down in a helmet or graves. But chainmail shirts, padded gambesons, and even breastplates often stay on through the night, the cold bite of metal or stiff quilted fabric digging into ribs and shoulders as they try to rest. Helmets sit beside their heads, swords within reach, shields serving double duty as both a barrier and a pillow. Rolling over as noisy mail clinks like a sack of cutlery, and every movement risks waking the man beside you who might respond with a groggy curse or worse, a swing before realizing you're not an enemy. The surroundings don't help. Castle floors are unforgiving cold stone that leaches the heat from your body. In the field, it's bare ground beneath a thin cloak, the earth frozen stiff, and the air sharp enough to sting with every breath. Fires, if lit at all, are kept small to avoid drawing attention, leaving men huddled close, exhaling clouds into the darkness. Sleep comes only in fits broken by the sounds of distant horses, a snap of twigs, or the low, eerie whistle of wind over the battlements. And there's the ever-present tension. Even in drowsiness, the mind listens for the unexpected, the muffled drumbeat of hooves, the rattle of a drawbridge, the hiss of a distant shout. When those sounds come, and they do, it's not time for gentle waking. Men scramble upright, half-armored, already fumbling for weapons, with fingers stiff from cold and exhaustion. The line between dreaming and fighting blurs, and many rise not fully aware of where they are, their minds still caught in fragments of sleep. Eventually, calm might return. The threat passes or proves to be nothing more than a startled animal, and the men settle back down. But the body doesn't forget. The tension lingers in the shoulders, in the way hands rest near hilts, even as eyes close again. In a world where danger prowls after dark, as readily as by day, steel becomes both a burden and a comfort, a hard, cold reminder that even in sleep vigilance can't be set aside. And while the soldiers drift into a shallow armored slumber, the night has other disturbances waiting. Some don't come from outside the walls, but from the bodies within them, moving where they shouldn't, eyes open but unseeing. It begins as a faint creak on the wooden floorboards, soft enough that you might mistake it for the wind pressing against the shutters. But then the sound repeats, uneven and deliberate, and when you open your eyes, you see a figure moving through the dim light. Barefoot, clad in a loose nightshirt, eyes half open, but glassy, the person drifts past the row of sleeping bodies like a ghost searching for its place. In the medieval world, this isn't simply dismissed as sleepwalking. It's something darker, something dangerous. The term noctambulation exists, borrowed from Latin, but most don't bother with the word. They whisper instead about spirits, witchcraft, or possession. A body moving while its soul wanders is by their reckoning a body open to influence and not the good kind. Neighbors murmur that such wanderers might be led by demons, or cursed by a witch, their steps drawn toward Wells Cliffs or even the churchyard. Fear makes the responses extreme. Families tie a sleepwalker's ankle to the bedpost or a chair, ensuring that if they rise, the jolt will wake them, or at least stop them from walking into the hearth or tumbling into the dark. Some burn herbs by the door to seal the home, hoping the smoke will block whatever force is guiding the wanderer. In more superstitious villages, the unlucky soul may be marched to the local priest at dawn for a cleansing ritual holy water, splashed across their brow as if they've done something more sinister than simply rise and walk. Rumors make everything worse. People claim to have seen sleepwalkers climb ladders, balance on rooftops, or speak in languages they don't know, their voices low and distant, as though something else is using their tongues. Whether any of it's true hardly matters. The fear is enough. A person found wandering the lanes at night might wake up the next morning, tied to their bed, or worse, shunned by their neighbors, whispered about as a conduit for something unholy. And yet most of the time it's harmless. The wanderer paces, murmurs, perhaps tries to open a door that isn't there, then drifts back to bed as quietly as they left it. But in the deep hours, when the wind hisses through the gaps in the shutters and the fire dies low, the sight of a figure gliding silently past your pallet can set your heart racing in a way no flea or draft ever could. By the time the wanderer settles and the floorboards go still, your pulse has only just begun to calm. You close your eyes, telling yourself morning can't be far off. But in this world, dawn doesn't arrive quietly. It comes with bells, voices, and the creak of rafters waking to another day. When the first light seeps through the cracks in the shutters, it doesn't feel like a gentle invitation to rise. It feels like relief. The night has been long, colder than you imagined, noisier than you hope, and more restless than you'd ever choose. You hear the distant toll of morning bells, the shuffle of neighbors pulling on boots, the low grunt of the pig rousing by the hearth. The draft hasn't stopped, the fleas haven't vanished, but the shadows that made every creak seem sinister finally begin to soften. As the cottage stirs to life, you realize that no one here expects to wake feeling refreshed. Sleep isn't for restoration. It's a truce with the night, a series of short, uneasy bargains made with cold, hunger, noise, and fear. You survived the split rhythm of first and second sleeps, the scratch of straw and pests, the press of strangers and animals, the distant chants and tolling bells, even the unnerving sight of a figure moving where it shouldn't. Each interruption felt like another test, not of strength, but of endurance. People here are used to it. They stretch, yawn, rub their eyes, and get on with their day, their faces lined not just by years, but by nights like this night's, where every small comfort was earned by tolerating a dozen discomforts. The farmer tends his animals before the frost can bite the mother, stirs the ashes into a morning flame, and the children, still blinking sleep from their eyes, tug on wool cloaks stiff with last night's chill. There's no talk of how anyone slept. It doesn't matter. You gather your own things, shaking out your cloak, brushing off bits of straw that cling stubbornly to the fabric. The smell of smoke and damp hay lingers on your skin, and the stiffness in your neck is a quiet reminder that the bed was more a formality than a refuge. But as you step outside into the pale, cold morning, there's an odd kind of clarity. The world feels sharper, quieter, and for a moment, the ordeal of the night feels like just another thread in the fabric of survival. In this time, people don't dream of perfect sleep. They dream of getting through another day and another night of keeping the fire lit, the roof mended, and their families alive. Comfort isn't the point. Continuance is. And as you watch the frost sparkle on the thatch and hear the distant caw of crows, you understand why. Each night survived is its own quiet victory, and each morning, no matter how cold, is a small grace that no one dares take for granted. So as the frost fades from the rooftops and the last curl of chimney smoke drifts into the pale sky, you leave the medieval night behind. It wasn't a place for comfort, not really. Sleep came in fragments, shared with family strangers, animals, and pests. The straw beneath you itched the cold, never fully relented, and every sound, the bells, the winds, the snorts and scratches, kept the night alive long after your eyes closed. For the people of this world, rest was never about waking refreshed. It was about getting through the dark and seeing another dawn. As you return to your own bed, with its soft mattress, steady heat, and blessed absence of livestock, it's hard not to feel a small gratitude. No bells calling you to pray at 2 a.m, no bedbugs or lice mapping out your skin, no figures drifting through the dark with empty eyes. Just stillness, warmth, and the knowledge that your greatest midnight interruption is likely a phone vibration or a distant car horn. Take a moment before you drift off for real. Breathe in, feel the weight of your blanket, and let the hum of the present settle you. And if tonight's little journey left you thinking differently about your own nights, leave a comment and tell me, where are you listening from and what's the hour on your clock? Are you curled up alone, or is someone or something snoring softly beside you? I'm Silas Whitmore, and it's time to let the medieval night fade away. Close your eyes, release the day, and let yourself sink into a sleep uninterrupted by bells, straw, or unseen companions. May your dreams be quiet, your blanket steady, and your morning come gently. Good night, and may your rest tonight be far easier than theirs ever was.